Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Chili Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lavender, and we are here with Pete Mohan to talk to you about Marquette getting bent over the wooden bench in the Kohl Center and receiving a whooping in what has seemed to have become a relatively normal thing in the Wojciechowski era, not necessarily with Wisconsin. But Pete, there do seem to be games like this where everything goes wrong, the wheels fall off. I hate that it had to happen against Wisconsin, but holy shit, this brings us back down after that great half against Purdue.
Yeah, I think that overall, coming down from the Purdue high, this is a pretty big smack in the face for expectations about this team. And to me, I was the most disappointed in the defense, giving up 1.12 points per possession to Wisconsin for 77 points. Just unacceptable. I mean, these guys really aren't that talented offensively, but they out-schemed us, bullied us in the post at times, and we didn't have an advantage at the three-point line either, as they ended up shooting 48% from three, even though we shot 47% ourselves. So really disappointed in the defense, and in general, I thought this was one of the worst games that I've seen from our front court in a while.
I think I agree with all that. I think when you're going on the road, in particular, in a big game like this, you need your star player to step up. And for as much love as we give Marcus Howard on this pod, and deservedly so, Mr. Howard shot 22% from the field, had an incredibly inefficient game. And really, if Marcus is going to have a game like that, because look, they do happen, but if Marcus is going to have a game like that, other role players need to step up. We saw good minutes from Greg. We saw Greg Elliott. We saw some nice moments for Jamal Cain. But Brendon Bailey and Sakar Nim really didn't step up at the moment and were didn't even register a field goal. Sakar or Bailey did. So it was a game for me where I started off really, Pete, by looking at Wisconsin's defense and thinking, whoa, they are a much better defensive team than maybe we had gone in knowing. And that to me felt like the story of the first half. I thought Wisconsin played terrific defense.
Yeah, I mean, they played great defense, and they forced us into some travels. I think that, that kind of has been a overarching trend for this team for the last few years is getting happy feet with the ball, turning the ball over in the backcourt. And it wasn't necessarily in this one that it led to like a ton of fast breaks. Obviously, when you have travels, those turnovers are dead ball turnovers. So they're not the other team's not getting out on the break off of it. But still, it's disheartening to watch when you have between Coby McEwen and Marcus Howard, two very experienced veteran ball handlers, and they should be at this point, 3 games into the season, having their feet under them. I don't know. Maybe they were playing with new shoes, or I don't know what the deal was.
Yeah, those black unis, right? What'd you think of those? You like those? I like them.
I don't know. Toss them. No, toss them.
Yeah. That's what there was a lot of that on Twitter.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It just seems like any time that we try to juice something out of the alternate jerseys, that it goes the opposite way. But maybe that's just me. For me, the one stat that really stuck out was Brevin Pritzl, 13 rebounds. Ed Morrow and Theo John combined 3 rebounds.
And it felt like
simply an embarrassment. Like, if you look at Wisconsin's front court, this isn't some big imposing physical front.
No, not at all.
Reavers, and then this wall guy, freshman coming off the bench, 4 fouls in 6 minutes. Yeah, maybe their backcourt and wings are fairly physical, but this was an advantage, in my opinion, coming into the game. Mm-hmm. And look, Reavers shot 2 for 9. It wasn't great, but he did have a couple dagger threes and 10 points. But just in general, we didn't impose our will inside. We got beat on the boards. We got beat to loose balls. We just frankly got out hustled in their place. Yeah. And it was a disappointing effort.
I think what you're saying about the front court and kind of what you ended on there, this game overall had a similar vibe, a little different, but a similar vibe to the first half of the Purdue game where we were getting out hustled. And kind of as I was thinking about preparing for this pod, my main thought was, I don't know if I can pin this wholly or even, majority on the coaches. Because I agree with you. What you just said, we were outworked on the boards, and the numbers back it up, but it felt even more pronounced in the game itself. It just felt like, Jesus fucking Christ, grab a board. And we weren't winning 50-50 balls.
Right.
The dumb turnovers, the travels, the poor sloppy passes. Yes, some of that's coaching, and coaches are ultimately responsible. We didn't look crisp. We didn't look like we wanted to take this, and grab the game by the balls. We looked like we thought we were going to walk in there and out-talent them. And clearly that wasn't the case because Wisconsin had a typical game, which, is hair-pulling, which is these, no-name dudes come in and, knock down threes. And they're not no-name dudes. They're talented. But it's just they had a collective team effort, whereas we didn't really have that collective team effort.
I think another thing too is there were open shots missed.
Yes.
In general, they defended Marcus well. Obviously to hold him to 6 for 21 shooting, but there were shots that he normally makes that he missed, and so, there's going to be games where he misses shots. But I think everyone in Marquette universe thinks that he should be taking 20 shots a game. That's probably the best thing for this team.
Right.
So I'm not mad at the volume coming out of Marcus. He'll knock those down. The thing that bothers me is when one of our guards makes a good penetration and kick, and our guys are in the right place, Bailey, Sakar in the corner, and then they just look like they've never taken a corner three in their life and airball it or whatever it is. Yeah. So I think that points to me that Wojo is setting the offense up for success. He has the plays drawn up right where he can get an open three in the corner. Mm-hmm. But right now, the guys that are playing the wing for us, they just haven't developed that confidence in the shot or whatever it is. And frankly, I think Bailey, we want him as a three-point threat going forward, but I would be happy if I never saw Sakar take another three-pointer. His shot's flat. It's inconsistent. His stroke's inconsistent. I mean, maybe one a game, but take the ball to the rack, Sakar.
Right.
That, if you have success at the rim, then maybe step out and use the jump. But Sakar needs to understand that's not his game. So
we were talking about.
I don't know.
We were talking about Brendon Bailey a little bit on the text thread during the game, and the announcers who don't necessarily like to get things accurate or correctly. We're talking as if Brendon Bailey, this was his first year back playing basketball. You astutely made the point that's what he looks like, so maybe that's why they're saying that. But Bailey, 0 for 2 from 3. Okay, you have an off night. But there was that one play, Pete, you remember, he got in the corner outside the three-point line, made a nice move driving to the basket, could have thrown it down for a dunk, could have laid it up off the glass, could have, whatever. And just, went up a bit too strong and it bounced off the rim and bounced out, a bunny. And so I don't know what you chalk that up to. We know Bailey's a better player than that. We know he's a good player. Is that the atmosphere? Is that the moment? I don't know. Maybe some of it is these kids just weren't locked in and ready to go. But those are the sorts of things, right? It's to your point. It's not why we're looking more at the players in this scenario is because there were wide open shots. There were air balls that should have at least found some fucking rim. And it's when those add up and the sloppy passes that, you know, I don't know if this team needs to find leadership or what it is, or maybe it was just an off game and we'll bounce back. But Brendon Bailey, I thought Jamal Cain had a good game and had some moments. And speaking of good game, we haven't talked about this yet. Jace Johnson, first moments in a Marquette uniform, got 6 minutes. What did you think of Jace's 6 minutes?
I mean, honestly, I thought he showed more energy out there than Theo or Ed did today. I mean, it wasn't like he filled up the box score or anything. He had a rebound and a turnover in 5 minutes, but he seemed active, getting into screening position, and he looked like he had a fair amount of basketball IQ. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when, you get these 7-foot guys in transfer, you don't know if they're just a 7-foot pylon or what they are, but he actually looked like he understood the game out there. And I don't think that Wojo would throw him in there even for 5 minutes in a key rivalry game if he didn't think that it was important. So I think that it was good. It was good to get his feet wet. I think just in general, we're talking about guys like missing shots that we're going to need them to make in the flow of the offense moving forward. I think that this year, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Wisconsin game was moved up by a couple of weeks. Usually it's the first week in December or something.
Yeah, that's right. Usually it's like December 8th or something around there.
And I think that this team is really going to benefit from playing some of the easier teams and seeing some more defenses down at the tournament that we're playing in and around Thanksgiving. The fact that we have to play Wisconsin this early, I think it prevented those guys who we needed to make those shots and those plays from maybe building their confidence enough before we had this game. However, it's hard to say too after beating Purdue, but again, those guys weren't really the ones who were integral to the victory against Purdue, I don't think. So I just think we need more development time and attention paid to these wings, and I think it'll take time to get them in the flow, but that's going to be the key to really making the offense click, is getting those guys involved and hitting shots when they're open.
Pete, there are definitely going to be some sections of the fan base who, in reaction to this this loss, Jesus, or in reaction to this loss,
Closet Badger over here,
jeez, aren't too happy that they are looking to point the fingers. Are you saying that we should not be overreacting to this, given this point of the season?
No, I mean, I think, big picture, I think we should have probably expected 1-1 out of these 2 Big Ten games.
Right.
If I had a gun to my head and you asked me what our record would be in those 2 games, I definitely would have said 1-1. Uh-huh. I mean, it's two tough Big Ten opponents early in the year. You win one, you lose one. I think
we just would have thought they would have been flipped, right?
Probably. But although, we've been due for a loss in the Wisconsin series. We had won 2 straight in the Kohl Center. That didn't bode well in my mind. It's a tough place to play. Really is a good atmosphere there, and our guys came out flat, and Marcus was not on. You have to give him credit. I thought that he did try to get himself going down the stretch, and that's what I think the fan base was like, all right, feed Marcus here down the stretch. If he misses, the game gets out of hand. It does. If he makes it, we hang in there. But having that guy on the team that you can even be hopeful of him pulling the trigger down the stretch to get your team back in it is something nice to have.
Yeah.
It just didn't go our way, and I don't think that Wisconsin in general is a 16-point better than us team. It was just their day, and we came out with poor effort.
It is funny to think that, I can see it in my mind that if this game were played at Marquette today, I could see this going exactly the same way, but with us winning. I mean, really, it felt like that kind of game where the moment was just too big for us. But speaking of one of the players that would have stepped up in that scenario. And I think one of the real bright spots, if we're looking over the first 3 games of the season, and certainly the past 2, Coby McEwen is certainly proving himself to be what we're going to need him to be come March, come late in the season. You made a great point about him earlier, which I'll let you make about his efficiency. But the guy, 4 for 4 from 3, and I think he, the first half of the Purdue game, he looked jittery as hell, right? He was herky-jerky and not in a good way. I think in this game, I don't know if he was a calming presence, but he was certainly much more solid throughout the game, hit several big threes, which didn't ultimately matter, but in the moment they helped stop the bleeding. And I like the way he plays. I'd like to see him try to find the lane a little bit more, maybe get to the rack. But he is clearly proven to be the opposite of Chartouni, right? He is delivering on expectations, and I think someone that, as we get further into the season, is going to continue to kind of, make good things happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we've seen him, especially in this game, a lot with the ball in his hands, with Marcus out there running around screens and things like that.
Yeah.
We kind of wondered about how much of that would be going on. And how that relationship in the backcourt would work. But I think that we've seen that they're a great complement for each other. The discrepancy in efficiency in this game, as you pointed out, the difference was that Coby scored 1 more point than Marcus in 12 less field goals. So just a difference in efficiency for sure from the field today. But like we said, wasn't that Marcus's volume was out of control. He wasn't making his shots.
Right.
But I do think that I would like to see more shots coming from Coby, and I think that where that comes is in the paint. And in general, I think that this is going to be one of our offensive bugaboos all season, and that is scoring in the restricted area and getting to the hoop. And we need that from Coby, and we need that slashing ability from Jamal and Greg, guys like that, and Sakar. Right now, it seems like our shot distribution, it's good. We're shooting great from 3, but we need to find a way to open up the middle and make that a place that we can make hay so that we can continue to have space out on the 3-point line.
Yeah. I think I know you were talking about shot distribution with regard to 3 or in the lane, but thinking about our shot distribution across the roster, it is, obviously there are tiers emerging, but just watching those guys out on the court, maybe it's just my mind trying to catch up from last year, but you can sort of tell that they're still figuring out what this team is. And that's entirely understandable, that there's not a pecking order yet, aside from kind of the obvious, maybe Coby and Marcus. Amongst all those wing players, of which there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, it's not settled. And I think until we get that settled, exactly what you're talking about, there's going to be some turbulence here and there. And I think one of the places those turbulence showed up, just to kind of flip it back around in this game, was there was a lot of wide open threes for the Wisconsin boys. There were some kind of head scratching. Some of it was on fast break stuff which was a little bit surprising to see Wisconsin push the ball as much as they did. But I thought there were some real missed assignments on the defensive side that seemed to me, I'd have to go back and look, that seemed to me to be primarily the responsibility of the wings. So I think you're right that those 4 guys in particular are going to be really key to the success of the team. But let's see how they develop. We've got at least 6 days before Marquette's game, probably 5 days. We play this Saturday against Robert Morris. So let's see how they continue to progress.
I think that what I just want to see from these guys is develop one thing really well. What is it that you do really well? Like Greg really showed me something today with a couple nice takes to the rack and strong finishes.
Yes.
And, we can't put all of the expectations of driving to the hoop on Coby and Marcus. So we need guys to supplement that action. And I think Greg we need to run some offensive plays that get him going downhill towards the hoop. I think Jamal is showing that he can be that reliable corner three, or I think that he looks more comfortable to me on the, what do you call that? The angle, the furthest
Elbow?
point, not the elbow. What is it called? The furthest point. Not the top of the key and not in the corner, but in between. I don't know what you call that. I forgot. But he looks good from there. So I just want to see Sakar. He's a senior. He's had a lot of time to develop. I think that Sakar's role on this offense has been most impacted by Coby's insertion into it. It's kind of bumped Sakar off of what his role was maybe last year and the year before. But he's a senior. He's a smart player. He has skills. He needs to find his niche in this offense. And I think, like I said, every one of these wings, Jamal, Greg, Bailey, and Sakar, they need to find that one or two things that they do really well and bring to this team and focus on those. Because if you try and do everything as a wing player, that's when you end up looking totally lost. So
right.
I'm looking forward to those guys developing some individual solid skills.
So this was a game we were talking actually just before we hopped on that Marquette dropped about 6 spots in Ken Palm after this game. Wisconsin jumped up about 12 spots from 50 to 38. And Pete, you were making the point to me that this actually re-triggered the game as a grade A matchup in Ken Palm based on kind of where Wisconsin ended up moving. So, Wisconsin probably going to have more of a down year, but because it's so early in the season, I think it's fair to say that Wisconsin could end up looking a lot better than what we thought they were 24 hours ago. And there's also, I saw it pointed out on Twitter, it would not totally shock me if this was Wisconsin's best game of the year and they just happened to show up and show out for this game. And from here on out, they have a rough year. It just felt like one of those games where everything was going their way. That happens sometimes. And I think the point now is, we've got some bye games coming in here, Robert Morris, Davidson, and Jacksonville, really before we have to face Kansas State at Kansas State on a few weeks from now on Saturday, December 7th. So there's some time to work some things out, but there are some challenges up ahead in the non-con really before we get to Big East play.
Yeah, and I think just in general, if you look at the team that probably the win will have more value for us down the stretch, you're right, it's probably going to be Purdue. So talk about building your resume. You look at it from that standpoint, might be more helpful to have that Purdue win, but it always sucks to lose a rivalry game. Yeah. The nice thing, though, is this isn't one of the problems that we have with Wojo. I think, he's 3-3 against Wisconsin. You see some of these other coaches in other college sports that can never get a win against their team's rival, and I just feel awful for those schools and those fan bases because it's nice to beat the red and white every once and again, but it just wasn't our year this year. Maybe we run into them in the tournament. I think that would be nice. We're the 5 seed and they're a 12 seed, and maybe get some revenge on the 5-12 situation. I would like that. That would be poetic to me.
That would be poetic. We didn't spend much time talking about it, but speaking of poetic from the other side, it really just stick the dagger in you and twist it when you see Brad Davison putting the basketball in the bucket. I think early in the first half and early in the second half, he missed a bunch of shots that he should have made, a layup even, and then really started to stick it to us and actually ended up leading Wisconsin in scoring, tied with Brevin Pritzel.
It's fine. This is the pinnacle of his life.
Yeah.
His O'Doyle rules looking ass. I can see him hanging out the side of a station wagon that goes over a cliff in a couple of years after slipping on a banana peel. It's a movie reference. It's a movie reference, kids. I don't actually wish that upon him, but
of course not. But
he's just a looking ass dude, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Let him have his moment in the sun. it's going to be rough from here on out for ball punchers. That the karma is going to swing hard against ball punchers in the future, such as Brad Davidson. So,
all right. Well, with that, we're going to head to America's favorite segment. The junk drawer segment. Pete, I don't know if you have anything in your back pocket. I got something. I can go first. If you don't,
go ahead.
So my junk drawer is actually from earlier today on the magnificent text chain that we talk about from time to time here on this pod. We learned that we got our first ever, maybe not first ever, but pretty damn close, voice recognition of one of our members, Pete Worth. Pete Worth, newly married, lives in Illinois, in the northern Illinois area, Kankakee. Was out on a hike with his wife, and a gentleman approached them and said, "Hey, would you like me to take your photo, with the scenery in the background?" And Pete said, "Yeah, that'd be great." And the guy said, "Oh, you have a really familiar voice." And they got to talking and figured out that it was the Real Chili podcast. But Pete, I actually think the guy at first thought that it was Pete Mohan and that he was hearing your voice. So I don't know what that says, but that's my junk drawer item. I thought that was great. I love to hear stories.
We lived together long enough that our voices like Venn diagrammed each other,
Right.
I think that's what happened there.
Yeah. So it is love to hear stories about the pod like that. We get them every now and then, and always fun to hear.
So, we really have no idea how many fans we have. Like,
yeah.
Maybe let's talk about math for I know my way around some numbers pretty decent, but making head or tail out of these the downloads and listenership numbers, right, Mike? Like what you said, it's like over 5,000 a month typically. Unique downloads is what it's called, right?
Unique downloads, right? Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean people are listening to the episode. They could just be downloading it and then deleting it immediately. Yeah, so it's not a 1-to-1, and it's really difficult. At least,
right. And then we get like 3 likes on our Real Chili podcast tweets, so we're like somewhere in between 3 fans and 5,000.
5,000.
We really have no idea how many of you listeners there are. So you guys we should run a poll
on Twitter
that everyone should guess that how many fans does the Real Chili podcast have? 0 to 10, 10 to 1,000.
All of this was born out of the conversation that we were having the other day. Is are we now more what was it? Are we now more influential or now more well respected than MU Scoop? Wasn't that your question?
Well, it's hard to be more intelligent than a hive mind.
Yeah.
So
I will always credit MU Scoop with starting this podcast. So MU Scoop has done one good thing. I went on there.
MU Scoop is just like the QAnon of Marquette basketball. It's like
I don't know if I told
rampant you conspiracy theories, and it's lovely. It's lovely fun if you're bored and just want to think about stupid basketball shit. But much love. Much love to the theorists out on MU Scoop.
The way this podcast started, folks, was like 5 or 6 years ago. I went on MU Scoop, posted something that I thought was supremely rational and logical, and it got shot down in this very epic thread by everybody. And I thought, wow, that really wasn't that dumb to have received that reaction. So I decided to start a podcast, and now we have somewhere between 5,000 and 3 followers. So take that, MU Scoop.
Was that the post about the announcer?
Yes, it was. Yeah. So maybe it wasn't supremely rational and logical, but it had to do with Mr. McEwen and an opinion about him, and it wasn't well taken. So
Mike opined that Jim McElvain's taller than him.
Yeah. Fuck that guy. Taller than me. What is he thinking? All right. Anything for you for the junk drawer?
No, I'm just it's
maxing and relaxing.
It's nice to see all of my Detroit teams just fall off of a cliff into the ocean and die. Every sport, it's terrible. Yeah. And so I'm so all in for college basketball season and watching Marquette, because I'm going to be brought no joy by any Detroit sports franchise for probably the next 5 years. I don't think. It's just the cupboard is bare. There's no Indians in the cupboard.
There's no darkest before the dawn, I guess, but yeah.
Yeah, if I could, the whole Detroit sports scene has somehow morphed into Darko. It's like all sports is Darko in Detroit.
Jeez, that's pretty dark. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's rough. Pray for me.
All right. Well, folks, you heard the man. Pray for him if you do that stuff. Otherwise, don't do that stuff.
Light me a candle at the grotto, you know?
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in to the Real Chili Podcast. As always, we're probably going to have some time off here because Marquette doesn't play until next weekend against Robert Morris. And who the hell wants to hear us talk about Robert Morris for 25 minutes?
Was that on the pod that we didn't post yet? The Robert Morris?
Oh, no, we posted that. There was – wait,
so
you and Pete recorded?
Well, we talked about the history and how we were impressed by Robert Morris, that Robert Morris was a financier of the American Revolution, and for that we thank him are impressed by him.
That reminds me, we did record a special limited edition pod for you folks, and I gotta send it to Pete Mohan. Pete, I'll send it to you right after this, just so you can give me a gut check on whether it's worth seeing the light of day for that one. So
it might be trash, but it might be gold.
Yeah, maybe trash is funny. Okay, all right. Thanks as always for tuning in, folks. Tuning into the Real Chili Podcast. We'll be back to you probably next week. Signing off for Pete Mohan. I'm your host, Mike Lavender, and for everyone else here at the Real Chili Podcast, those lazy motherfuckers can't hop on a Sunday night. We'll talk to you next time on the Real Chili Podcast.
Goodbye, nerds.